Well, we're in the middle of January, January the 14th to be precise, and at this time of the year, when the winter is at its bleakest, everything is dormant, but lo and behold, in the same greenhouse, let me show you some delightful surprises. Let me show you the plant and the flowers, and then I will talk about the plant in a moment. So for those of you who do not know what that tree is, this is the Japanese apricot. This is the shape of the Japanese apricot leaf. This is what it looks like, and that is the apricot flowers. Japanese apricot are ornamental trees that have been bred in China and Japan for thousands of years. In fact, the Chinese call it the mui fa. Mui means plum and fa is blossom. So plum blossom has always been in the folklore of Chinese and all Oriental folklore. So they are admired for both the beauty of the flower and also because it has a beautiful fragrance. At this time of the year when nothing grows and nothing is in bloom, the apricot comes into flower so early. The Japanese call it ume, and of course the Chinese call it mui. Mui and ume, the same writing in both the Japanese kanji script and the Chinese script. But it is Japanese or Oriental apricot. I don't like to keep calling it Japanese apricot because the Chinese grow it as well. So this is a pretty old tree. This was originally a Japanese tree, but you must be wondering why I'm growing them in these flower pots. The reason why I'm growing them in flower pots is because the Japanese apricot in the Western Hemisphere, that means in countries like England, France, northern France, Germany, Sweden, all the mid-European countries, they have very cold temperatures. And Prunus Mume, ume, is difficult because they are really not quite a Mediterranean climate tree, but they are not very hardy in the Western Hemisphere. So for those of you who are wanting to grow Prunus Mume, be warned that it is an extremely difficult tree to grow. And again, these are growing in baskets because I'm trying to get them stronger. Look at the strong shoot there. That shoot, which is about a meter long, grew last year. This shoot, which is about 50 centimeter long, also grew last year. But this one has got quite a lot of dead shoots. So I've been struggling with Prunus Mume for more than 25 or 30 years, and I can safely say that it is not an easy tree to grow as bonsai in what we call the Western Hemisphere, the temperate, cold temperate climates. They may grow well in Spain and southern France, Portugal, where the temperature is much warmer, but in the cold parts of Europe, and I would say like Midwest United States and Canada, you will struggle. So let me say something more about this tree. Most of you will know me well enough by now to know that I am a person who likes to do experiments. Having come from a scientific or engineering background, I always like to discover why things happen. And although this is not engineering, this is about plant sciences. And to understand why plants grow in a certain way just takes a little bit of deduction. You don't have to be, as they say, a rocket scientist, but you can use ordinary deductive principles. I bring you to this area because here is another Japanese apricot that has grown fairly successfully. It is still in its bonsai pot. This is how they come from Japan, and it is a near perfect tree. But this is because this tree came only a couple of years ago. But over the long term, I can assure you that they don't do so well. As you can see, I'm in the outside area, only covered with shade netting. So this shaded area, although shaded from the overhead frost, still experiences temperatures of -5, -7 degrees centigrade. And this has stood here right through the winter. So you can see this is more behind than the other ones in the conservatory or greenhouse that I've just come from. So these are just about to bloom. So they are, I would say, a couple of weeks behind. So I'm doing an experiment here to see how they survive when exposed to the cold, but not entirely exposed because it has this shade netting cover to give it some protection. So I will see how it develops. But the message I'm trying to get across to you is that Prunus Mume in the Western Hemisphere is a difficult tree to grow. I've seen beautiful specimens in Japan with really old gnarled trunks, and in southern Japan, in Kyushu Island, they have a festival every year around mid-February when all these Prunus Mume are in full bloom, and there are hundreds of varieties with different colored flowers, and they all have this lovely fragrance, and they have festivals to celebrate this. So this is just a brief introduction to the Prunus Mume. On our whole nursery, I've only got this one and that big white one and the two which I'm experimenting with. So as I say, it is not an easy tree for beginners. It's an extremely difficult tree to grow. And with that, I will go back into the greenhouse and show you a few more pointers about the Prunus Mume. So here we are again, showing you close-ups. This tree, I would say, is well over 45 years old. The trunk diameter of the nibari at the base is about 5 to 6 inches. And although it's growing well, I do take care of it by protecting it in the winter. And look at it. Really gnarled old trunk. And I'm growing it in this flower pot to get it strong. And when it gets strong, I will then put it back in the bonsai pot. Bonsai pots, because they have limited volume and don't have a lot of space for the roots to develop, the trees tend to suffer a bit. So whenever I see a problem like that, I tend to put them in flower pots and grow it stronger. In fact, what I might do, if this tree continues to grow strong, I may put it in the ground to see how strong it gets, because I know that you can grow apricot as fruit trees, which are grafted onto ordinary prunus stock, and they tend to survive quite well in the British climate as outdoor fruiting trees, with perhaps a little bit of protection. But these have been protected in this greenhouse here. But I shall try and see if they survive better outdoors. So this tree, the apex is quite strong, so nothing wrong with this. But some of the side branches seem to have died. But it occurs to me that many of these prunus, especially the ones you see in these Japanese manuals where they show these gnarled old trees, they have bark like this and trunks like this. So the habit of having branches die back is quite normal, or what we would say par for the course for this type of tree. But I'm just putting my nose to the flower, and I can assure you it has exquisite fragrance, really exquisite fragrance. And when you see flowers like this, you can't help but fall in love with it. These long shoots, what I might do, I might take cuttings from it, because prunus do grow from cuttings, although they're not semi-hardwood. It's almost semi-hardwood, but they are 1 year's growth. It might still strike. I will have a go and see whether they survive or not. So there you are, this little video about Prunus Mume as grown in the Western Hemisphere. I wish I was in southern Japan or lived in southern Spain or in Portugal. I'm sure these trees would fare much better there, but I can still live in hope and hope to grow these successfully in due course. It's never too late to try. A lot of people say, oh, I'm too old to start trying all these things. But if you adopt that attitude, you will not do anything in life. So don't give up. You can always keep experimenting with things. So this is my continuing experiment with Prunus Mume, which is a difficult tree, but I have never given up hope trying to grow these well. There you go.